Hello, hello, everybody. We are here with another fun and amazing guest episode. So today's guest is Jonathon Aslay. Am I saying that right?
You said it perfectly.
Okay, perfectly. And Jonathon has kind of an interesting story. So the focus of one of America's leading midlife dating coaches has expanded into a deeper, essential philosophy of what it truly means to love. After losing his 19-year-old son, Connor, in 2018, Jonathon Aslay's grief led him on a soul-searching inner journey where he became aware of an often overlooked dimension of the dating conversation. He realized that the dating process reveals the most common emotional health issue faced by many singles seeking a partner: a distressing lack of self-worth, self-regard, and self-love. Today, he's on a mission to encourage both men and women to fully love themselves with his book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway?, packed with fun, engaging, spiritual, and personal growth practices. So thank you for that, Jonathon, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. It's so funny to hear my bio.
Isn't it always so weird?
Yeah, it's like, who's that guy?
You're like, he sounds great. Oh, wait, that's me.
I wonder what he's going to say.
I don't know. We'll find out though.
Yeah.
I love that, like, really what comes through though is like, sure, maybe it's about helping people find a partner, but it really does sound like it's just this general love. Like, how do we become more loving, not just of someone else, but of ourselves, and in how that kind of impacts our relationships?
Well, when you think about it, our interpersonal relationship dramatically affects or can affect our emotional well-being. So when and dating, the dating conversation, the relationship conversation really triggers this stuff like nobody's business. I mean, I can't imagine, being a math professor and going, oh my God, it's going to affect us emotionally to the same degree, our
That's
interpersonal relationships do. And maybe mathematics does. I don't know.
Maybe you love it so deeply. And maybe it goes back to the love.
Yeah.
It's possible.
So, but, and given that you're a sex therapist, this is like, so much of our biology is driven by our desire for physical intimacy that plays another component to this, equation called self-love and interpersonal relationship and all that good stuff.
So I'm kind of curious, just from reading your bio, like, how did your son's passing lead to I want to hear the connection. Like, how did that path happen to you becoming this, kind of popular YouTuber dating coach guy?
So, and thank you for asking. It's interesting. Right prior to him passing away, I began studying the Course in Miracles.
Oh, interesting.
And interestingly enough, at the chapter that I was on happened to center around death. And the Course in Miracles, the idea of the Course in Miracles, the way I look at it, the true miracle is when we can choose love over fear, when we can choose love over ego, when we can choose love and compassion versus judgment, resentments, and all these things. So his passing was timely because I was studying this concept of love in a way that I hadn't really looked at. And at the same time, I'd been blogging. I had done a lot of blogs, like what does self-love mean kind of blogs. And so and let me add this to the equation. When I was giving his eulogy, which was 2 weeks from the time he had, or actually 10 days from the time he passed, I said to everybody, I remember stopping and I said, look, we can all grieve through suffering, or we can grieve through love. And I didn't know what I was saying in that moment. I was just saying it, kind of thing.
But I had this pretty good.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of patting myself on the back a little bit, but there was this kind of like, okay, how can I look at this experience instead of suffering through it? How can I cherish his memory, know that he would want me to live my life to the fullest? I mean, he was a kid that would want me to live life balls to the wall kind of life.
You sound
and so
cool.
I began thinking about, what does it really mean to love for me? And the most important thing about self-love is or at least the way I perceive it, it's all of these juicy words like self-worth, self-reliance, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-discipline, all just wrapped up in a nice, tidy bow, the heart of love. So And what I believe is when we can actually begin to love ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
it's an antidote. It's like a vaccination to emotional chaos in a way.
Ooh, say more
And
about that. Cause like we're all going through a lot of emotional chaos in the world
yeah,
lately.
exactly. So, and it's an introspective way of looking at life. So that's kind of where this got birthed. Was he was the catalyst for me, but and he's also been, like that experience of even death made me look at oftentimes our greatest our if we ever look at a root fear, if you get
Mm-hmm.
to the root of a fear, it's always I'm gonna die. you know
I agree with you on that one. Where there's like this ego death, I think, especially that we're afraid of, and so many things that you're saying. So, I didn't read A Course in Miracles, but I was a practicing Buddhist for 13 years. And I do think that a lot of different spiritual paths point towards the same place. So, everything
yeah,
you're saying about like reminds me of the Buddhist phrase, like, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional in terms of like how you approach the chaos and the emotions that come up, especially with grieving your son, is like really worth thinking about, because I do think that that happens in many ways, in relationships and in the dating
yeah.
process.
I actually, and I'm only going to touch upon this for a moment.
Yeah.
After he passed away, about 6 months later,
Hmm.
I did a psilocybin journey,
Oh, interesting.
and and I wanted to connect with him and connect with the other side, if you will, which I had an
Hmm.
amazing visitation from him.
Oh,
And
wow.
and since then, I mean, well, since by the way, I've been blessed because I've had so many visitations from him in a variety of different ways since he
Yeah.
passed. But why I'm bringing this up is I really began part of love is, at least in my purview, my way of looking at things, is kind of establishing what happens when we pass away, or at least my interpretation of
Yes.
it. So
Yes.
I've done 30 ceremonies, psilocybin ceremonies,
Wow.
really kind of, I don't want to say conquering the fear of death, but embracing this experience and be as loving as I possibly can to myself, because I believe we come back and do this over again, just in a different format. So
Hmm.
so that's the other catalyst that he brought into my life, was a real curiosity about, what happens when we die and overcoming the fear of death, which I haven't done. I'm just working on it. So
Same. Yeah. So I've had moments though. Like I think I've had some like meditative moments where I'm like, oh, I'm like not afraid in this moment. That's amazing because I never thought I could be unafraid
yeah.
of death. Um, it always shocks me when people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm not afraid of death, whatever." I'm like, "Really?"
Well, there's a
But
byproduct of also trusting that everything is going to work out. Like, I mean, to
yes,
some
yeah,
degree, whenever you're feeling angst, whenever you're feeling
yep,
discourse, is just also surrendering to the experience and trusting that in some way, shape, or form, it's going to work out.
100%. I love that. So okay, so let's segue into how do you become like a dating guru guy?
Nobody goes to college to become a
No
dating or
one
relationship
does.
coach.
There's always an interesting path.
I'll try to give the Cliff Note version, but after turning 40 and going through a divorce a decade and a half ago, I
Hmm.
found myself back in the dating marketplace. And there was this thing called online dating,
Oh
which was
god.
so green, you
Yeah.
know, back in the early 2000s. And
Hmm.
I thought you could punch up exactly what you want and someone would magically appear, which it did.
Okay.
And I had a I remember my first date, really nice date, nice woman, something
Okay.
wasn't right.
Okay.
Another date, nice woman, something wasn't right. Another
Hmm.
date, nice woman, something wasn't right. And after
Okay.
100 internet dates in 1 year,
Oh
first dates,
wow.
I realized the something wasn't right was me.
Okay.
And what was happening though was I was making connections with people all across the country, and in some cases just talking on the phone,
Hmm.
sharing our divorces, sharing our experiences.
Hmm.
And in a way, it was therapy for me. I didn't realize that this was a cathartic experience. But Heather, what was happening was women would reach out to me, women I never met, just because I'm talking incessantly. Because
Yeah.
it was kind of a self medication too.
I could see that. And I see people who approach dating that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I was actually a serial talker. But what was
Okay.
happening is women would reach out to me and say, "Hey, Jonathan, would you look at my dating profile and help me make it better?"
Are you
Like,
kidding me? Like you
no,
would
I
just
swear to
become
God.
friends with them and then they'd be like, well, I guess we're not going to date, but help me.
Yeah, but well, because sometimes they live 500 miles away. It was
That
just
makes sense.
and by the way, I had some days I had 6 text message boxes. This is back when Yahoo Personals had like these, you could separate them. I could have
Okay.
6 conversations going on at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Well, because I was an emotional train wreck at this time. I was this
Okay.
complete, gigantic emotional train wreck. So this was my drug of choice.
That
But they
makes sense.
were asking me to improve their profile. So I'd say, do this, this, or
Yeah.
this. And then a month later, Jonathan, I've got this date with this guy. Will you look at his dating profile and tell me
Hmm.
what you think of him?
Yeah.
And I pretty much had this intuitive sense. I could tell the serial daters, the serial monogamists, the bad boys, the nice guys, and the
Interesting.
guy looking for you is what I jokingly say.
Okay.
Um, and that's how this was birthed.
Okay.
And also, not only have I accumulated 20,000 hours of coaching, I've also done over
Oh,
3,000 hours of personal development workshops, trainings, videos, books. I've immersed myself in understanding human behavior.
yeah.
So that's kind of how this all got started.
Gosh, that's amazing. And I get what you're saying where it can be like your drug of choice because there's a lot of dopamine hits in there of like, ooh, this person liked me. Ooh, this person's so cute, or like, oh, I feel even with like the 6 chats open at once, it could be like, ooh, these people need me, or like I'm helpful, I'm being validated in some way. And I think whether we're like single or in relationships, we can kind of be looking towards other people to make us feel how we want to feel.
Well, if you look at, here in the United States, anyways, we're suckling on the nipple of I need you to
Mhm.
validate me so I can feel good
Oh
about
yeah.
myself. I mean,
Oh
we
yeah.
are addicted to that. And,
Yes.
and I, by the way, I'm raising my hand. I'm part of that, 99% of the population.
Uh-huh.
Um, And so self love is that capacity to take a step backward and look at your life both as the actor on the stage, the director
Mhm.
directing everything, and then the audience member witnessing everything. That's part of what self love is also about as well, is looking at your life from an introspective perspective.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's something like in the past when I've struggled emotionally, it's been very easy for me to be like, I need to call my dad, and then I need to call my friend. Then I needed like other people to comfort me and other people to kind of give me the answers and fix it and figure it out. And um for me, it's like it can definitely lead to I guess some kind of codependency, where it's like I'm not turning to myself. And what I notice is I can still turn to other people. It's good to have a support system.
Yeah.
But if I turn to myself first and do my journaling or go on a walk or feel my feelings and cry or whatever it is that I need and then process it, I'm not like dumping on other people as much, It's it to me it like elevates the relationships a bit.
Yeah, because you're coming at it hopefully from a more objective place. But at the same time, like I have friends and I go, look, I need to vomit.
Yeah, sometimes that
And
happens.
so I'm letting them know in advance, or when I say friends, I mean my emotional support community.
Yeah.
Look, I just need to get this out. I need to vent. I need to vomit. Just hold space. But at the same time, I'm going to go, look, you know me. I want
Mhm.
your perspective on this. So let's process this too. And
Yeah.
I think we all need a good confidant in our life, preferably
Yeah.
more than one.
Agree.
Um, and whether they come to a coach like us to start,
Mhm.
or a therapist, I should say, I encourage everyone to have a really good community of confidants in their life, because
Mhm.
we need to, like it's like when you said vent, like a volcano vents to erupt the buildup of pressure. We all
Yeah.
need that,
Yeah.
I believe, for a healthier well-being.
Yep. Yeah. I think so too. And I like what you're saying about having ideally more than one person because it does seem like there's less community. than there used to be.
Yeah.
Decades ago. And even sometimes, I did a study abroad in Europe and have traveled a bit. And sometimes you just see like people gathered in the square, just hanging out and talking. And, I feel like there's not quite as much of that in the US. It feels like I'm from Chicago. And I think even living in Chicago, it was like, there's so many of us in like this small, relatively small space that's like densely populated. And yet it's kind of like, we're just ships passing in the night, and then we go
Yeah.
back to like our little apartments, this little box we live in, and then we like go out and face the world again. And I'm like, oh, that kind of bums me out. Like, I think, I don't know, it feels almost more of like a draining way of coexisting instead of like a supportive communal way of existing.
Well,
Like,
I think we're in our human experience, I think we're going through an evolution.
for sure.
And so this isn't by accident, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly up until about, 100 plus years ago, people did live in tribes and villages in small towns. Let's go back maybe 50 or 60 years ago.
Okay.
And there's certainly been a shift from that tribal community type of village, if you will,
Yeah.
to more. But I also think this is a great opportunity at the same time to embrace individual empowerment, to embrace emotional maturity, to
Mm-hmm.
embrace self-love. I'll come back and I'll even bring
Yeah.
it to that concept, is that we're given, and by the way, as you said, it is through our pain that we can grow. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it is through, pain is inevitable,
Yep.
and yet suffering is optional, as you
Right.
said. The pain is an opportunity to work on oneself. And so
Yes.
I use the dating conversation really as my bully pulpit to encourage personal development, self-help, and
Mm-hmm.
spiritual work and
Mm-hmm.
therapy, um, as an antidote, as I said, to emotional chaos.
Hmm. I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense too, that um yeah, dating is just sort of the vehicle, but there's lots of vehicles. And the idea is kind of growth, and it's so easy also to kind of resist the challenges. And I've been guilty myself at times of like, oh, I can't deal with online dating anymore. It's like the pain is too much. It's led to the suffering, and I'm just going to opt out. But then that could also be its own suffering. So it's like you can't escape pain. I think is
Well, the interesting part
yeah.
of what you just said, online dating didn't do anything to you.
Mm.
Okay. I mean, if
Debatable,
and
debatable, Jonathan.
yeah, pardon me.
I said that's debatable.
Well, I meant the portal that you're swiping through is just a
Fair.
vehicle, right?
Okay, right.
And so, and honestly, it's the word dating. Okay, so I jokingly say this, and it is okay if I curse.
Oh, please.
Okay, so do you know why they call it dating?
No.
Because holy fucking shit, it's insane trying to figure out another human being was taken in the dictionary, so they replaced it with the word dating.
Oh.
Holy fucking shit, it's insane trying to figure out another human being. Okay,
It
I'm being tongue in cheek. Okay.
Yeah.
In other words, to really get to know another human being in a romantic sense, we have
Mm-hmm.
this thing called dating.
Mm-hmm.
But and on the online course is really not dating, it's just meeting. It's just a vehicle to meet people
Yeah.
to see if you want to explore something together.
Yeah. I like that
But
framework. Mm-hmm.
but we've adopted this, I have to impress you and I have to look good as our methodology for dating. In other words, it's heavily weighted on romance and not the really most important question that should be answered in the dating process. And that
Mm-hmm.
is, who is the truth about who you are? What is the truth about who you are? That's the question.
Hmm.
But most people are oblivious to that question of who's the truth about who you are as a person. Because Heather, unlike 100 years ago,
Yeah.
when we made it in our tribes, we knew everybody. We knew their truth.
That's true. There was more context. And I think that's one of the tough things about meeting people online is that there's no context. You got to like,
Yeah, there's strangers.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and we have a fear of being vulnerable. And we have a fear of just even asking the deeper questions, because it's not romantic. It's not sexy. It's not I mean, a first date question isn't like, what do you do for a living? A first date question is, what's your greatest fear around relationships? That would be like a really radically honest question to ask
How do
each
people
other.
react when your like clients and audience asks that? I'm so curious, like where that
Well,
goes.
so it's overwhelming because we
Mm-hmm.
haven't, as a species, developed enough emotional maturity, emotional
Mm-hmm.
resilience, enough self-love to
Mm-hmm.
not take that personally. It's a valid question. But here's the way we date. We go out on a few dates, we have sex, and all of a sudden you're attached to a person who could be completely misaligned with you. And
Yes.
then they wonder why dating is so frustrating.
Right. And then they would get married and they're like, oops, did we not base this on
Yeah,
the right criteria?
yeah, exactly.
um, yeah, that's true. I mean, it's not easy, and it's like the sexy romantic part is fun. And back to the dopamine hits, way more fun endorphins and neurotransmitters going with the sexy time. But yeah, often it is sexy time with a stranger. So that brings us more to the sex topic. Like, what are
Sure.
your I guess thoughts, wisdom on sex and dating?
Well, I try to have it as frequent as possible. That's okay.
Highly
So,
recommend. Yeah.
the challenge is I'm a guy, okay? I want to have sex with everybody. I
Okay.
mean, I mean, that's kind of an exaggeration, but to some degree, my threshold for whom I have sex with is much lower than my threshold of who I want to be in relationship with. So,
Well, that makes sense.
and most men operate that way.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, I coach women
Mm.
to my job is to help women spot the emotionally broken men because I was an
Okay.
emotionally broken man. I know what
Oh,
that looks like.
interesting.
I share
Okay.
from that
Okay.
experience. So, so, you know, I mean, sex is also a really beautiful thing. It's a really wonderful thing. It's a way to connect at a level that you really can't through
Yeah.
words.
Right. I'm a fan.
So, I, when a person has sex, that should be, that's their choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that once we're physically intimate with someone,
Mm-hmm.
particularly women more so than men, they
Mm-hmm.
bond more. I
Yeah.
think you should be radically selective on whom you connect with on a sexual level. In
Yeah.
fact, I was listening to a podcast on Lewis Howe's um, School of Greatness, and he had a
Mm-hmm.
guest speaker on just a few weeks ago who said kissing is like he was talking about kissing is an exchange of connection, but it's also an exchange of baggage.
Oh.
Another, and I thought and I'm paraphrasing this, so please forgive me, but
Hmm.
you're bringing all your past luggage into this kiss. You're also bringing the desire for connection in this kiss. But
Huh.
in other words, even kissing is a relatively intimate experience, and we
It
trivialize it.
is.
Um, but if you look at the movie Pretty Woman,
Mm-hmm.
Julia Roberts said, "I'm not going to kiss you. That's too intimate." She'll have sex with
True.
you.
True.
So even kissing has an exchange of bonding in it. So
Yeah.
maybe it's important to be even selective with whom we kiss, or at
Yeah.
least make out with anyway.
Yeah. I think everything you're saying makes so much sense. And I like that you're not putting sort of like a number of dates or like a framework. It's like it's going to be different for everybody. But,
Yeah.
as much as, my feminist mind wants to be like, but women are equal or whatever. I do think in this area, there's some biological differences where there is research that shows that women tend to get attached after sex. And what I have come across is that men only tend to get more attached if they're already emotionally invested before the sex. So it's not that they don't, it probably just depends on the guy and it depends how invested he is to begin with.
Well, I
Um,
think biologically speaking, as men age, their testosterone levels drop and their
yeah.
estrogen levels increase. So
Uh-huh.
by the time, and I'm a tail end baby boomer, just to give you
Okay.
some context. So yeah, I do get attached physically because I am, especially if I have an emotional connection. If
Right.
I don't have an emotional connection, well, I'm at a point in my life where I don't need to chase sex anymore. So I'm
Yeah.
looking for a heart on to go with my heart on.
It's so cute.
And I didn't coin that. I heard that from a friend.
It's very cute. Yeah.
But when I was younger, it was like, who can I have sex with? I was
Yeah.
like sex on the brain.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and you mentioned feminist movement. I'm all in favor of empowerment for both men and
Hmm.
women. I mean, just to be individually empowered. That's
Yes.
kind of what self-love means to me, is to be
That makes
empowered.
sense.
The challenge with sex, though, and I'm beginning to believe it should be more sacred.
Hmm.
I don't mean that from an evangelical perspective,
No.
but I do believe that, it is an intimate act,
Yeah.
and reserve it for someone that you have potential for, not, I just want to get off kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
And I'm just more encouraging that. But at the same time, if you want to get off and two
If it's
consenting
working
adults
for
want to get,
you,
yeah,
my whole thought is like, if it's either it's working for you or it's not, like
yeah.
let your own feelings about it dictate the direction you go in. But I mean, I think factually too, from like a biological standpoint, if you have a vagina, you're going to be more likely to get the STI than the person with the penis. Right. And so like there is like a higher physical risk. If you're still menstruating, you have the higher risk of getting pregnant and your entire life being thrown into upheaval than if you're the person with the penis.
Well,
So,
and if you think back prior to 1960,
yeah.
prior to the invention of birth control, which changed
Hmm.
everything from
Yeah,
from
I
a
did. Well,
human.
that's not that long ago.
No, I mean, yes, you're right. It's only
Yeah.
60 plus years ago.
Right.
Is that there was a more sacredness because there was a consequence for
Yes.
having sex with the wrong
Yes.
person.
Yes. And
Um,
there are still some consequences,
but not, I mean, even an
Not as
STD, you
many.
can
Yeah.
take penicillin and get over it, kind of thing. I mean, for the most part.
But I mean, like I've had to take the Plan B pill a couple times, and it's like that messes me up for months.
Oh,
Like
it did?
oh yes, like
Oh, yeah, that's right. It
the
is a,
hormones in that like mess up. It's not just me, like a lot of women, So it's like we have consequences that the people with the penis don't. So I think that's part of it too. And I guess for me, for my self love, there also has to be sort of like, okay, this other person has to be kind of bought in. Like we need to be able to have a conversation about like, if the condom breaks and I accidentally get pregnant, what are we going to do? And like, if we can't
yeah.
have that conversation, then we probably shouldn't be having sex.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement.
So that's where I'm at.
I want your opinion on something, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of conversation, particularly today, that if women have had multiple sexual partners,
Mm-hmm.
can they really, after a while, even bond in a healthy way when they meet a partner that actually has some potential? I mean, there's
Oh, I
some,
think so. Yeah.
okay, because there's
I guess.
conversation to the contrary to that. So, and I'm not, again, I'm not speaking as a woman. I'm just
Yeah.
asking it as a curiosity question.
It probably depends on like, are they just emotionally wounded to begin with, and that's why they're having like lots of sex with lots of people, or are they like empowered and they're very sexual beings, and maybe they have a loving partner and they're in an open relationship. Like a lot of it depends on the actual situation of the individual, I would
Yeah.
say. But yeah, I mean, I know people in open relationships who are very sexually active and also feel like they can be very, connected and loving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, just putting that out there as a
Yeah.
question. So,
Yeah. So yeah, I'm curious, like with your coaching with people, like how do you navigate this stuff with them? Do you do one-on-one coaching, or do you more of like a group program?
um, pretty much majority of my coaching is one-on-one.
Okay,
I
cool.
and because it's individualized. So what
Mm-hmm.
I've observed is human beings don't really know themselves and know what they want. But they do it from a
Mm.
place of, I think I know what I want. And Heather, how I know this is I put together an 8-week proprietary coaching program. And what I
Yeah.
hear every single time, every woman says the same thing to me after going through my coaching.
What do they say?
Why didn't my parents teach me this? Why didn't I learn this in school? Why didn't I learn this before I married the wrong person? So
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
hear
an
that.
extensive deep dive into clarity on who's compatible with them, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, it's developing the radically honest questions, those vulnerable questions, to
Mm-hmm.
determine compatibility, and more importantly, to determine emotional maturity. And
Okay.
so, and interestingly enough, I've noticed something about women.
Okay.
And this is not a judgment, so please let me just say it and then we can unpack it.
Okay.
A lot of women believe that they are more emotionally mature than men.
Yes, I
What
agree.
I've observed though is most humans don't even, they might feel their feelings, but they don't really know how to identify what they're feeling. More importantly, how to express their feelings in a way that can be seen, heard, and understood.
Mm-hmm.
And just because women have a propensity to vomit a lot of information doesn't necessarily mean they're good at delivering it or even identifying it.
Mm-hmm.
Men are just flat stoic. They oftentimes just are shut down from
Yeah.
their feelings. I mean, again, this is generalized. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
an absolute. So, one of the things I've noticed with my clients is, I'm pressing them to really get to the core of what their needs are on
Hmm.
an emotional level. And this is painstaking work. I have clients say to me, this is hard. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because really learning how to identify what you're feeling and then to be able to express it to someone else
Yeah.
is challenging to say the least.
It is. And I mean, I'm also someone who's dated a lot, who's kind of recently making a little bit more effort to date again. And it's not easy. And I think like what you're saying about looking inward is important, sort of like allowing your relationships, whether they're, short-term dating or long-term relationships or marriage, allowing your relationship to be like a mirror to yourself of,
Yeah.
like what am I co-creating here? Like how am I showing up, and how is that impacting like what's being reflected back to me? I
Yeah.
think can be so interesting. But it's tough because, I'm sure even though I've also done thousands of hours of personal development, I'm sure I still have blind spots, and also sometimes I think you need to be patient for someone who is
So,
a good fit.
I want to share a perception and I want your take on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because, we have right off the bat and I'm talking about human pair bonding mating. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have right off the bat our instinctual gender, scripts or programming. Okay.
Yeah.
Men are hunters, providers, women are nurturers and gatherers, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's that first layer of programming. And the
Mm-hmm.
next is our biological programming. And, hormones, pheromones, all those
Mm-hmm.
things, testosterone, estrogen, all plays a part in this. And then we have our socialization.
Yeah.
Boys are taught to be a certain way, girls are taught to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And even within that socialization, there's trauma associated with that,
There is. Yeah.
boys are taught to stuff their emotions. Women are
Yep.
objectified based on look, or
Yes.
girls, excuse me. Boys stuff their emotions.
Right.
Violence equals masculinity.
Right.
Girls, it's all about beautification.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our imprinting, what
Yeah.
our parents did to us, whether we have love attachment style issues, whether we have, did we have gigantic trauma in our childhood, or did we have
Mm-hmm.
garden variety bullying that happened in our childhood?
Yeah.
And then you have your age and your life experiences play into this. And oftentimes there's adult traumas of breakups and loving somebody and having a treasured relationship end and all that, then you have your job and your work and all these kind of things and maybe even kids. And then I'm going to keep going here. So give me
Yeah,
a
there's a lot.
second.
Yeah. Lots of
Well, then
layers.
we have our cultural and our religious programming that
Oh, and
plays
I work
into
a lot with
effect.
that. Yep.
And then we have our socioeconomic and our education. That's another part of our script. And then we have
Mm-hmm.
our physical health and appearance that has a script. And so when you look at like my son does coding, and when you look at you write the first layer of code and the second layer of code and
Oh,
the third layer of
that's a
code.
really interesting way to view it. Yeah. We're all
So
coded.
we have all this code that plays into it, but we
Mhm.
hear a lot of dating rhetoric all centered around men are hunters, providers, and women are nurture gatherers, as if, but you're not taking into account all this other fucking
Yeah.
code
Thank
that
you.
that
Yes.
plays into this
Yes.
equation.
Right. Right. And there's so much more. And then there's like race, then there's like body size, and then there's like, what you think you're good at, what you were taught are your strengths and weaknesses. And then if you have like neurodivergent, like there's just like infinite layers.
So a person who becomes they make the choice to be introspective,
Yeah.
and to me, self-awareness is like, you're the actor on stage. There's the director that's
Mm-hmm.
telling the actor what to do. And then there's the audience member witnessing it all.
Yeah.
When you can look at life from those three vantage points and
Mm-hmm.
really take a step back in all of those spaces
Mm-hmm.
and recognize that life isn't about, here in the United States, we are suckling on the nipple of victim consciousness.
Oh, there's a lot
Um,
of
and it is so prevalent now, but you are actually the actor, director, and audience member of your life. It's a more empowered way to
mm-hmm.
live, I
Mm-hmm.
believe,
Yeah.
when you can approach life and understand that you're a flawed human being. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, we're all flawed human beings.
Can't avoid it. Sorry, everybody.
And and actually, if you can almost look at our actions from a place of curiosity, but even sometimes absurdity,
Mm-hmm.
and why I say absurdity is, you know, we humans do the worst thing to ourselves, and that's emotionally beat ourselves up. I mean, we are
Yes.
flogging ourselves in such many humans, I don't
Yes.
mean all, in such a horrific way
Yes.
that the absurdity part is it's kind of laughable to look at
It's
how
insane.
absurd we
It's
are,
insane. Yeah.
because what we should be doing is loving ourself like we would love a little child or a
I
pet.
know. And then it impacts how your relationships go. So, I mean, I see that with my clients all the time where, like,
Yeah.
when someone is already really hard on themselves, then it's very hard to take feedback from their partner.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, oh, you think I'm terrible and awful. And I agree because part of me agrees with that. And also thinks it. And then I just like can't even handle it. I'm in like a
Yeah.
shame spiral. And it's like, okay, well, we need to work on some of that in order to be able to get through the dating issues or the sex issues or whatever it may be. How do you
So
suggest people work on that? That's like a tall
so to
order.
me, I'm laughing because I'm sorry, because this isn't funny what I'm about to say.
Okay.
So I'm a big proponent of personal development, self-help, spiritual
Yeah.
work, and therapy.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've just said that. We encompass that in self-love. Dating is like the Hunger Games out there. It is like a fight to the death, okay?
It's very
Doing this
honest.
work on yourself
Yeah.
just puts the odds in your favor.
Oh,
Okay.
the
The
odds are
odds are
in
against you.
favor.
I'm sorry. I'm going to be blunt. I'm not going to be a dating coach that tells you this fantasy.
Yeah.
The odds are against us.
Okay.
Okay. Love is a risk,
It really
but
is.
it's still the best game in town. It's
That
worth
makes
it. It's
sense. That
worth
makes sense.
getting into the Hunger Games but do that work ahead of time
Yeah.
so you become the best candidate, like
100%.
in that show.
Yep.
You become Katniss Everdeen,
I like
who can.
that. So how do we become the Katniss of self-love? Like, what does it look like? Do you do certain practices? Do you have to meditate? Like, how do you get there if you know you're being
It's
hard on
okay.
yourself?
So it's everything. I
Okay.
mean, we spend more time worrying about the shoes we're going to buy or what we do at work. And I'm being tongue in cheek here for a
It's
second.
true. And again, the dope.
Um, I believe an hour of introspective work per day, whether it includes
Wow.
meditation, whether it includes your physical well-being through yoga or some other discipline.
Okay.
But most importantly, um, I look at it like learning how to play the piano. It's a practice you do every day, and give yourself an hour of this practice. It might be
Hmm.
listening to this podcast and going, oh, wait a minute, they recommended this book. Okay, let me get this book and let me start listening to that or
Mm-hmm.
reading that. And let me watch a podcast and let me go to a workshop and training and let me work with a confidant, a friend. Let me work with
Mm-hmm.
a therapist. I mean, I'm here to invite human beings to go beyond an hour a day, but to really I believe the richness in life is the inner journey.
Yeah.
I think that's where the richest part of life. It's not about putting your finger on top of the Eiffel Tower and taking a picture. So you did that. I mean, it's great to see all those things,
Yeah,
but
it is.
your inner world, I think, is the most amazing journey on this planet.
It
And so
is. Yeah.
I'm a junkie for it.
I love that. And I love that you listed so many things people can do because I'm a big believer, even though, I mean, I actually work as a coach, but I'm licensed as a therapist. And personally, I like there's more freedom with the coaching for me.
Yeah, I agree.
but Yeah, I'm not someone that's like, you have to only do therapy or you have to only like do coaching and have like someone else. There's a million paths, like infinite to self-development. Like tonight I'm doing an improv performance with my level 2 improv class. Like
Yeah.
that's become personal growth. You know, you do it because you're just like, oh, let's goof around and have fun. And then you're like, our class is very therapeutic. The first day we had to just gaze into people's eyes, 3 different people for a minute each without talking.
Yeah.
And then we did this whole exercise of like tuning into people's emotions and like saying out loud what we're observing about how they look or how they seem, sort of like their state that they're in emotionally. Lots of eye contact. We'd have to convey our emotions and practice accurately conveying, and the other person would have to like guess a character. So it's really interesting, but I want people to kind of get out of the box of like growth needs to look a certain way, or telling their partner, you need to go to therapy. It's like, well, what if they need to just take a meditation class? What if they need to spend more time outdoors? What if they
Well,
need
no,
to...
everybody needs therapy.
Well,
Just
I'm a
jokingly
fan.
speaking.
Obviously, I'm a fan, but
Okay.
you know,
So, well, I only wanted to tongue in cheek that
yeah.
one. Here's the challenge. Most of us, we are at a state in our humanity, if you will, where
Mm-hmm.
we can actually, we have the freedom, because we're not here, at least in the United States, we're not worried about impending war or impending, survival.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have the opportunity to be introspective, to grow at an
Yeah.
emotionally mature rate, to be emotionally, have some
It's
emotional
a good point.
intelligence.
Yeah. Like we're very lucky to be in that position of not.
Yeah, and by the way,
Yeah.
there's like 90% of the planet doesn't get this benefit. I
Exactly.
mean,
Yep.
for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you look at other countries, like India, I mean, meditation and church and things like that are
Yeah.
predominant. It's all about their emotional well-being. So it's not
Yeah.
like they don't have other modalities. Um, I think in relationship, it's very naive to say, I don't need to work on myself. I think it's actually,
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to say it's ignorance per se, but there is a level of ignorance there.
Yeah. There is. And
Looking
I
back
mean,
at your past relationships is one starting point, and
mm-hmm.
not from the point of the vantage point of pointing the finger at the other person. It's looking
Mm-hmm.
at those 3 fingers pointing back at you.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I'm a big
Taking
believer in it takes two to tango.
Yeah, taking personal
Yeah.
responsibility. And what self-awareness is recognizing one's fears and insecurities and negative judgments of others, and how our actions affect other people, and our limiting beliefs and our negative patterns that bring us pain,
Yeah.
and the ability to shift to love, as I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
when we are suffering.
Can
And
you
that's my
share?
invitation.
It's a beautiful invitation. Can you share just a little bit about like what was Jonathon like before? And then what is the more self-loving Jonathon? Obviously not perfect, because we've established
Sure.
you're not perfect, but how is it different now? And like how do you think or behave differently?
So I appreciate this question, because as
Mm-hmm.
I reflect back in my 20s, I was very self-centric. It was about, and my identity was tied into my professional life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I turned 40, I went through a divorce. Um, I lost my high-end corporate job, and I got wiped out in the market crash of 2008 and
Oh,
9.
wow.
And I had a 7-figure net worth. And so
Wow.
I had to move in with my mom and dad at age
Whew.
40 in a 1,000 square foot retirement community
Oh my
home, because I was
goodness.
dead broke.
Wow.
So I had to have a humbling event to, and I looked in the mirror, and, I didn't see anything back. And I was like, I got to work on myself. And most people use drugs and alcohol. Um, of course, my drug of choice ended up being online dating, which thankfully turned into the
It's pretty
profession I'm
healthy
in,
then if you
because
have
it
to pick
it
one. Yeah.
gave me some sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And if I look back at all of my experiences, I mean, it started with the first book I ever read was called "You Can Heal Your Life" by Louise Hay,
Okay.
and then there was the movie that was 10 years before I got, or years before I got married, and then I the movie The Secret came out. And then I
Yeah.
started to listen to Tony Robbins, and then I
Okay.
listened to Wayne Dyer,
Yep.
and I listened to Abraham Hicks, and I started,
Mm-hmm.
learning about Marianne Williamson, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
spiritual teachers. And then I dated a therapist for 6 years. And that was like,
Okay.
it was like, I mean, I had a built in, she just worked on my shit for 6 years.
God.
You know, and then I did the Hoffman process, and then I did insight seminars, and I
Wow.
went and did neurolinguistic programming, and I did
Cool.
Reiki, and I done so many different things because I was thirsty
Yeah.
for healing.
That's amazing.
Um, it's that recognition that you want to heal and work on yourself. Once you become, and I became a junkie for it, almost
Mm-hmm.
to an excess. But that's because I lived a very self-centric, egoic,
Mm.
selfish life. And I was a jackass to my ex-wife,
Okay.
and I wasn't a really good father. And it's taken me almost the better part of 20 years to really be a decent human being,
Wow.
because we were raised to be self-centric here in the United States.
True.
Um, and now I live life more. And again, I've had humbling. By the way, losing my son wasn't the humbling event in my life. It was losing my identity. My
Wow.
professional identity crushed me.
Okay.
So I had built all this emotional scaffolding through personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy. So
Yeah.
by the time I lost my son, it
Mm-hmm.
didn't take me down like it takes 90% of people out there.
Okay.
Or
That's
I'm just making up that
amazing.
number.
But I mean that I feel like that with like if you show up for your practice will show up for you when you
Yeah.
really need it. I have not lost a child, but I remember when I fell skiing and um tore my ACL. I remember like I actually didn't freak out and panic. I was like, let me just be present. And what will I do?
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy that I'm not freaking out. But yeah, I think it is really worth putting the time in. So if people are like, ooh, I like what this Jonathan guy is talking about, like how can they connect more with you?
Well, my name is listed here, so type it into Google. Actually, type it into YouTube. I record five live videos a week,
Oh my
or four
gosh.
four or five live videos a week.
Wow.
I'm constantly talking about. I use the dating conversation to really encourage individual growth. So go to my
Cool.
YouTube channel or type in my name on Google.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, we'll link to your YouTube channel in the show notes as well.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you for just sharing so openly about your journey and giving us some wisdom today.
Well, thanks. This has been a true pleasure, and you're a great interviewer. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, bye, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.